That's, anyone got a question for Nic? There's a gentleman here and a lady over here. To start with those two.
Okay. Yeah, Nic, do you agree that the one policy proposal that can actually bring about the sort of things you're aiming for is a shorter working week? It's one thing that everybody can sort of unite about. It could actually create a mass movement. I think Juliet Shaw had that idea when she wrote her book. And there was an NEF meeting about this only the other day. The problem is, as I see it, is that if you have ideas for making workplace happier, will people be more inclined or less inclined to go for a shorter working week? Because basically we need a shorter working week to have the time to achieve these 5 ways to well-being. Time is actually crucial in all this. And unless we do get that time, I can't see any way forward, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the currency of well-being is time. And people who work shorter hours actually seem to enjoy their jobs more than people that work longer hours. Though that's even with the fact that most people who work longer hours actually are quite interested in their jobs. But if it goes over about 45 hours a week, you start seeing things dropping off. And I personally think that, 3-day weekends is a good rally call to the troops. And actually people would like more leisure time in our society. There's a trade-off. I mean, basically all the economic growth we've had over the last 30, 40 years, we've taken in money. We could have taken it in time. And so we've taken those productivity gains in actually working the same amount of time or even longer hours and earned more, and we could have taken that in time. And so I would agree with you that I think that is one of the key things that we should be doing. I don't really worry about the fact that making happier workplaces is going to get people to stay at work long. I mean, there is an interesting issue there about what's theft of a business. If they provide everything for you, is that actually a theft of your private life somehow? But I think that's a fairly marginal issue. I think most of the issue is actually getting people to be more open at work and more able to delegate and to trust people probably would be the critical things.
Okay, there's a question just down here, I think. There you go.
Yeah.
Hi Nic, thanks for that. First of all, I really enjoyed it. I heard about this thing recently called Gym Pact, and it's set up by these 2 students from Harvard, and the concept is basically that people are more motivated by short-term sticks than long-term carrots, and the idea is that you sort of commit to a certain number of days at the gym, and each day that you don't go, you have to pay a penalty, and they split that across, so every Sunday they sort of count up the number of people who didn't go and count up the earnings from that and divide it amongst people that did sort of meet their commitments. And I was just wondering, listening to you, whether you think that in the short term you could sort of impose on people by a system like that, the 5 ways to well-being, and as they start to live those things and understand, the benefits of it, whether you could wean them off slowly, and what you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, whether one should use financial motivations to be the thing is probably debatable, but the idea that doing things together is absolutely the way to, that's why people have, Slimming World and Weight Watchers and things like that. Things that are difficult in the short term, if you collect people together and you do it as a commitment together, then people are more likely to succeed. Athletes train together. Things that are hard in the short term, it is always better to do in groups. I mean, basically, doing anything in groups is more fun than doing it on your own. So those sort of things will work. I mean, there are people. I know someone who was an author who he used to, if he didn't write enough a day, he used to fine himself £20. Then he used to get really worried what he'd do with that £20. Because, should he give it to his wife? Well, that wasn't really helping anything because, it's still in the family. So in the end, what he did was he used to put it in an envelope and leave it on a train so a random person would get it. I don't know. I mean, that was quite funny. But yeah, I think we can create... And commitment devices. I mean, we use commitment devices to get over short-term pain for medium-term things. I mean, a university degree is a commitment device. actually it's a 3-year commitment device to getting a qualification, and you commit to it. Marriage is a commitment device, if you want to be brutal about it. But, you'll stay together for 20 years, thick and thin. I only managed 20 years, that's why I said that. But basically, you stay together to bring up the kids, and then maybe if you're lucky, you still like the person. But anyway, whatever. There are commitment devices.
And on that controversial note, any more questions? Gentleman here, please. Any more show of hands? Let's see where we're going next. And lady over here next, thanks.
Hi. You said the right metrics are fundamental to driving change, sort of the methodology you use. I just want to suggest whether you could combine that with something else. It's like Einstein said, intuition is the sacred gift and mind is the faithful servant, and we've forgotten the sacred gift and worship the faithful servant. There's a guy called Ian McGilchrist as well, who wrote a book, who's a neuroscientist, wrote a book called The Master of the Mystery. And it's a similar thing about the left brain and the right brain and how they combine, and how the left brain functions in such a way that it's not aware of how the right brain actually connects with the left brain. And for example, there's also a guru called Mother Maya, and she talks about ahimsa and about inner peace coming before any peace can come on the external world. And you talk about the 5 measures of well-being, and one of them was taking notice, which some call awareness. So my thought is whether in the methodologies that is used, whether we need to combine awareness and reason. So it's reason and awareness, or reason and heart, or whatever the 2 things you want to call them, mind, heart. A combination of the 2 things need to be combined to actually come to an understanding, or greater understanding.
I think that awareness raising is actually one of the main strategies that we have. Is how do you go? I mean, there's obviously there's a group of the population that get the message around, say, sustainability, which is what Happy Planet Index is basically a sustainability indicator, but it's putting some fun into sustainability rather than just making it what we've got to give up. It's actually saying what's a positive outcome too, and the idea of it is to bring it into a broader population's awareness that these are issues and that they need dealing with in a way. So awareness thing. I mean, measuring awareness is really, really difficult. I mean, measuring happiness is difficult enough, but it's like, actually putting that into metrics is quite tricky.
So not measuring awareness, but actually using the tool of awareness as the methodology to be used in actually working out what are the things that need to be done. So it's the actual...
I mean, I think in lots and lots of ways, I mean, Happy Planet Index is a very top-down indicator. It's a few of us saying what should be measured, and there's a whole other body of work which is around community indicators, which is actually communities coming together and through their own awareness and through their own communication, choosing their own indicators, and actually that can be a very powerful thing at a local level. Yeah, so I think there's lots of... with this stuff, there's so many ways into the space. We talk about one way, but there's just not one way to this. There's millions of us that need to be doing stuff on this. So, yeah.
I think there's a very interesting point in your question around this balance between logic and emotion, if you like, is sort of simplistically saying it, which is most of our business world and our political world is obsessed with logic and reason. And of course, as Nic's shown, to make the right decisions that are good for people, you need rationale and data and evidence. But we're very much in danger of losing our kind of human and kind of heart-led side of decision-making. And human instinct and our connections are so important in making good decisions, not just in business as much as in personal lives. And so, for example, this week when you hear the Minister for Schools, Nick Gibbs, said something about teaching emotional intelligence in schools, he called it ghastly. He said teaching social and emotional intelligence in schools is ghastly. And somebody commented on our website that surely we should be letting people making decisions about children's emotional well-being be made by people who themselves have emotional intelligence. And there's a real challenge here that lots of people who are very successful as decision makers are incredibly good and attuned to the rational side of human decision-making and have lost a little bit of their emotional intelligence and their kind of heart-led instinct. So I think we need to combine the logic and rationale of this kind of work with a sense of what's the right human thing to do as well. So the question was a lady over here.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this evening. Thank you. I work in the long-term care sector, and I'm really interested in promoting well-being in the elderly. Because frankly, I think as you get older in this country, life can get a lot more miserable. You can be living on your own. You can have problems with your health. And I suppose I'm looking more adding life to years. than years to life. And I just wondered if there was any specific research going on in looking at the elderly and well-being in particular.
There's lots, isn't there? I'm looking at Catherine now, but there is a lot of research going on that. But I'm not an expert in it myself. But it is actually. I mean, the whole idea about it being about quality rather than quantity of life at the end, I think, is really, really critical. And there's all sorts of inequalities that really play out of that. You know, is that most women die alone in poverty, globally. Because they basically, the men have died earlier and they haven't got pensions that are they're very frugal anyway. So there's actually quite a lot. I think we're a society that's very frightened of death, and we push it aside, and we celebrate youth, and we don't really respect it. And that's some of the reasons why at the beginning I used images of older people, because older people's faces are just fantastic when they come alive. And I think how do we respect our elderly is probably one of the most or how we don't respect our elderly is one of the sort of most dysfunctional things in our society. And there, there is obviously, most people want to die at home, and most people die in hospitals. There's all sorts of things around that's very, very bad. And there is a lot of research, but I'm afraid I'm not really on top of the research myself personally, because it's not an area we've done very much.
But there are some practical, interesting things in the area as well. So Nick talked about resilience earlier, and the idea of teaching people resilience has been tried now in schools, bizarrely in the US Army at the moment, but also there's a fascinating project at the Young Foundation where Action for Happiness is physically based, working with older people, helping them develop emotional resilience and so on. It's called Full of Life. So if you're interested to find out more about that, we can certainly put you in touch with the people who are running that. So show of hands, gentleman here and lady here as well.
Hi, it builds on the point of you making about sort of, people managing organisations that are sort of more sort of rational than sort of emotional. But to what extent, if any, have you had trying to persuade sceptics? And lots of this, I'm sure, like vast intuitively makes a lot of sense, but because they essentially think currently in a different way and see the world in a different way. I mean, I guess sort of rather horrible phrase is like the elevator pitch. I mean, if you were trying to persuade sort of organisations to adopt this mentality in a country where, and I have friends that work for big national charities who are overstressed and overworked, and I have friends that work for consultancies exactly the same. There's this sort of overarching sort of mentality that's completely counter to this. What are sort of the killer facts that you would try and use to persuade a sceptic of the people leading organisations that are in a very powerful position to start moving in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, let's assume that they are the rational, the financial type of people, because they probably are. And, you go straight for their bottom line around, the evidence that happier workforces are more productive, particularly in service industries. So, think about it when you're in a restaurant and there's a grumpy waiter. They don't have any peripheral vision at all when they're grumpy, so they don't notice when you want attention or anything like that. So there's things about, particularly in service industries, around high productivity gains. Staff retention, unhappy people leave. It probably costs you £15,000, £20,000 for each person that leaves when you have to re-recruit. Sickness absence, just save 1 day per an employee per year, and you've made a huge saving. So you can do things like that. And in fact, we're just designing at the moment on our Wellbeing at Work website, Happiness at Work website, a calculator. You put in a number of employees, and it will basically show you that if you made them happier, how much it would save you. Then it will show you how cheap the survey is. But basically, so that's the rational argument you use. Yeah. Now, I actually think there's a lot more to do than that, because obviously they would say, yeah, but we can spend money on something else and do something. So there's all sorts of things you need to think about. But I mean, that's the sort of way we approach it. And basically, they're not going to be your early adopters, that type of person, ultimately, because they don't see that world. And one of the issues in business and organisations is that the type of people that get promoted are often the people that exactly aren't the type of people that are intuitive, and they're delivering because they actually are. I mean, I think this is partly. I wrote a blog about this the other week about how there is this evidence that nice people earn less than not so nice people in businesses, and I think it's that it's assertive male promotes assertive male is the issue, and so there's this sort of self-defining system in there, and I think organisations. There's an article in the Times today, Times 2, that Norway is the best place for women in employment. And there is a law about that 40% of directors have to be females, but actually they're already moving in that direction a lot. And it's not just about meeting the law. And I think actually if we get more I mean, that's, it's very male, female to say this, but more femininity, more relational skills into businesses, we would start to get over those problems. And that is actually the sort of Trojan horse of the happiness work, is actually how do we become more relationships, both men and females, how do we relate better? Because lots of people can have key performance indicators for themselves that do very well, so they get promoted, but they're actually at the expense of other people around them who don't get promoted, and so the group loses. So there's a complexity of things going on there.
One of our recent events with a chap called Henry Stewart, which some of you may have been at, talking about happiness at work. So much the same way we'd urge you to look at Neff's tool for measuring well-being. If you want an inspiring talk about how to create a happier workplace, on our YouTube channel and website, there's a wonderful talk by Henry Stewart on the topic of this as well. So the lady over here was next. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, so just think about the last couple of questions after this as well.
Thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed and agree with just about everything you've said. I wonder, are we, particularly here in the West, kind of got what we've voted for, as it were? So you mentioned at the beginning that most movies, most films about the future are pessimistic and full of gloom. But we go and watch them. Are we buying into, are the filmmakers, just picking up on our general vibes of being pessimistic?
Yeah.
And that's a very big thing to change, isn't it?
It is a very big thing to change. I mean, I think we probably had this last question, as they were saying. But basically, we have this huge bias as an organism towards the negative. Good news doesn't sell. Bad news sells. People have tried to launch good newspapers, good news channels. We don't buy them. Why don't we? Because we are acutely attuned to danger. We have this huge bias towards the negativity because it threatens us. It threatens our survival. When we were, evolving as a species, it was very, very important for us to think that rustle in the grass might be a tiger, even though 99 times out of 100 it wasn't, because of the fact that it was about our survival. And the problem is that now everything is geared towards the negative. I mean, when I was driving my kids to school, I used to turn the radio off when the news came, because they don't need to hear about a stabbing in Liverpool when they're on the way to school. They like the music and they like the Radio 2 chat, or I used to make them listen to Radio 2. But anyway, they like that, but then they don't want to hear about. And so we have all this pollution actually around negativity. And there's actually someone who did a very nice TED talk about giving up news for a year and how much better they felt. And, and I think there's all sorts of information. And so we do have this bias towards it. So we probably wouldn't go and see just happy films. We like redemption films. Things go wrong and then they come happier. If everything is just happy all the way through, it's not very good drama. So there are issues with that, but it's about a bias. I mean, Barbara Fredrickson will say that we need 3 times as many positives to every negative that we hear for us to overcome that bias. In fact, right up to 8 times. But if we just have all the positive with no negative, challenging stuff, that also is dysfunctional. So, but basically, it's because of that whole thing. And it's a very, very serious issue, I think. And, and we have, people and it suits the power structures to keep us frightened and to, basically, there's a lot of stuff in there. Read Max Neef's book if you want to have a really good thing about how power structures keep people in a consumerist society and all sorts of things.
I'm afraid, folks, we're out of time. We need to get out of the venue. I would just say, I mentioned this in an email to some people, that we're going to go for some drinks nearby. If anyone's interested to carry on the conversation, I'm sure you've got lots more you'd like to talk about. There's a pub, I believe, called the Dover Castle, is that right, Paul? So, which is just as you come out of the venue, take a left, and it's sort of just across the road in the mews there.
And
so
I have colleagues here. There's Michael from Wellbeing at Work, there's Juliet, Rich. There are people around who you could talk to, and there are Action for Happiness people. They should stand up, shouldn't they?
They're everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
But can I just say thank you all for coming, but in particular thank you to Nic for a wonderful talk. It's covered such a wide range of topics. Thank you.